Dear participants, I welcome you all to today's conversation, the seventh conversation. I welcome Nancy Marangu to start the meeting.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the seventh conversation on gender and climate change in Africa. These conversations are hosted by the Inclusive Climate Change Adaptation for Sustainable Africa, ICASA. ICASA is working towards an equitable and inclusive climate resilience tomorrow. ICASA aims to enhance adaptive capacity and resilience among communities in Africa through a gender transformative and socially inclusive approach and promote gender responsive climate policy actions and strategies. My name is Nancy Marangu. I will be your host today, and I welcome all of you to participate in these conversations. Kindly note that these conversations will be recorded. This conversation is streaming live on ICASA YouTube channel. We also encourage you to tweet this conversation using the hashtag gender and climate conversation. I repeat, the hashtag is gender and climate conversations. Our guest has a special request. She would like to have today's participants list. This includes your name and email address. If you will not like your contacts to be shared, kindly indicate in the chat box. In case you have a question or a comment, please type it in the chat box and they will be answered after our guest speaker, who is Ms. Tilope Akosa, lawyer, executive director of C21st and a woman climate justice advocate. Ms. Titilope will be engaging with us on amplifying African women's voices in climate, finance, and the Green Climate Fund. I will take a few minutes to read to us Ms. Titilope's bio. She is a legal practitioner by training with many years of experience in the justice and human development sector. A humanist by inclination, Akosa has devoted considerable energy and passion to issues bordering sustainable development as well as justice and equity for the marginalized segments of the society. The platform of Center for 21st Century Issues, C21st, which she coordinates, Akosa has enhanced her active involvement in series of research and advocacy on diverse issues relating to climate justice, women's rights, gender equity, environmental sustainability, among others. Her engagement with the global advocacy community in the past 15 years has been devoted into strengthening networks of stakeholders for mainstreaming emerging 21st century issues with a view of enhancing sustainable global environment. In collaboration with other stakeholders, she has lent her voice to the global campaigns for transparent, accountable, and inclusive participation at the local, national, and global levels. Her partnership with reputable global initiatives include membership of Women and Gender Constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, abbreviated as UNFCCC, the Green Climate Fund, GCF, and Gender Monitoring and Anglophone African under the project Participation is Power. Women Demand Gender, Just Climate Finance, a project of Women, Environment and Development Organizations, abbreviated as WEDO, in collaboration with both ends. Akosa is also a member of the Continental Executive Board of Pan-African Climate and Environment Justice Alliance, abbreviated as PACTA. In Nigeria, she currently works with the Federish Abbott Foundation and other stakeholders to pilot a coalition for socio-ecological transformation, abbreviated as COSET. I welcome you, Mrs. Titilope, to share with us your insights, and we'd like to give you 10 minutes to share with us. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really very grateful for giving me this platform to come and share my work and a few other information that I have concerning climate finance and the Green Climate Fund. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to be here, especially when I'm among my sisters. And you know what that means? It means that there's opportunity to network and then to share experiences and to learn from each other. So it's very, very important for me this afternoon to be here. And I really appreciate the opportunity given to me. So I think I need to start. Maybe a lot of us will be hearing about climate finance as women who have been involved in climate change issues. Of course, when we talk about finance, we are talking about money. And when we talk about climate finance, we are talking about money to address the impacts of climate change and to mitigate climate change. So that's basically what climate finance means. And a lot of us also know that climate change has been happening. Even the pace at which it's happening now, it's unprecedented. The IPCC report, the latest report that came out on the 7th, if I'm correct, on the 9th of August, 2021, have provided the strongest evidence linking extreme events such as heat waves and human activities which are causing climate change. And they're making extreme weather events more frequent and more severe in every part of the world. So whether we like it or not, the whole world is coming to the realization that climate change is happening. So if it is happening, how do we address it? Who is the most impacted? Because worldwide, we know that women are impacted the more. Basically because of our interaction with climate-dependent sectors. We women were the ones that get waters for our family. We are the ones that provide food in the house to make sure that the whole family eats. We are the one that is in charge of hygiene and sanitation in the home. And these are important sectors which climate change is impacting all over the world. So women are disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change. And we also know that women in Africa is also vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And women who are in Africa, of course, are also very, very vulnerable, just like other women in the developing world. We know also that in 2015, the Paris Agreement was agreed upon by the whole world to limit the atmospheric temperature to 2 degrees and preferable to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Then if we have to do this, if the whole world is committed to do this, then the finance to actually ensure that this happens is very important. And the finance must be very, very ambitious. It must be ready to help those who need it the most and who are at the front lines of climate change, which women is one of them. So, next slide. So, what is gender and climate change? Just as I've told you, basically, is the finance, is the money we need to adapt and mitigate climate change. And anywhere we find ourselves in the world where there's impact of climate change, there's always some devastating impacts that we see. We see heat waves, we see irregular rainfall patterns that is destroying people's crops. A lot of people are losing their crops year in, year out, either due to too much rain or less of rains, and all these things are happening. And these are losses and damages that everybody is is experiencing. So to address loss and damage, people need finance to cope. They need finance to get themselves back to the stage where they were before the disaster struck. So finance is really very important for us. And when we are talking about finance, just like I said, it's about money. So how do we get the money, especially to women who are most impacted and who are on the front lines? The next slide. So there are a few things that we know, which is very important when we are talking about finance. We need to paint the picture of what is on the table, especially about women. And we know that the adverse impacts of climate change affect women and men differently based on their socially ascribed role, which I have explained earlier. Then women form the majority of the world's 2.1 million living in poverty. So there are some existing challenges that are facing women already before the impacts of climate change. So the impact of climate change is exacerbating this poverty already. And they are often disproportionately affected by climate change impacts, which aggravate existing gender inequality as a result of persistent gender norms and discriminations. We know that. We also know that when we are talking about financing, we are also talking about how to make money. When you go into the finance world, when people start talking about money, people at times talk about profit. People talk about investment. How do you invest? How do you make money? And we know that because women are very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, discussing the issue of finance in the finance space, vulnerability is not sexy. Vulnerability is not attractive. For a lot of people who wants to invest, vulnerability, it's not something worth investing in. Then the question is, if women are vulnerable and they are the front lines of climate change, then if discussing financing means that it's not vulnerability is not sellable, then how do women get the money into their hands? How do they adapt and mitigate climate change without adequate finance? But one thing also that we know is that over the years, the importance of mainstreaming gender into climate change has been ongoing. And many climate funds, the ones that are under the UNFCCC and the ones that are outside it, have recognized the need to mainstream gender into climate finance. It has been a struggle for women's movement over the years. And over the years, we've been able to gain some momentum in that area. For instance, the Green Climate Fund was the first fund that started out considering gender in its funding structure. And that gave that inspiration to all other funds that has been before it and that are coming after it to also begin to ensure that gender is mainstream into climate finance. Next slide. So, if that is the case, what are the instruments that we can really hold on to say, yes, this is providing this for women? A lot of us know also that the Paris Climate Agreement reference gender, at least for the first time in UNFCCC history. We have an agreement that talks about gender issues. We also know that the Sustainable Development Goals 5 and 13 also talks about gender equality, women's empowerment, and 13 talks about climate actions. And then we know that Article 9 of the Paris Agreement says developed country parties shall provide financial resources to assist developing country parties with respect to both mitigation and adaptation in continuation of their existing obligations under the convention. So that is about finance under Paris Agreement. So putting everything together, as the momentum goes up, by 2019, the UNFCCC itself had put up a gender action plan. I've adopted a gender action plan, which has 5 pillars. And one of the important pillars is gender responsive implementation and means of implementation. So when we are talking about implementation, also we are also talking about finance. We are talking about the finance to ensure that projects on climate change are financed and are implemented. And we also know that after the Gender Action Plan expired, a new 5-year Gender Action Plan was adopted at COP25 in Madrid, Spain. That was in 2019. So what is gender responsive implementation and means of implementation is, just like I said, is one of the pillars. The Enhanced Gender Action Plan sets out objectives and activities under 5 priority areas that aim to advance knowledge and understanding of gender responsive climate action and its coherent mainstreaming in the implementation of UNFCCC and the work of the parties, the Secretariat, the United Nations entities, and all stakeholders at all levels, as well as women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in the UNFCCC processes. So the issue of women's equal and full and meaningful participation also is talking about finance. If we want to really participate meaningfully, we need finance to do that. So why African women's voice is important to deliver climate finance? We need to ask ourselves why, especially in Africa. I had said earlier that we all know that the African continent is one of the continents that is vulnerable to the impact of climate change. And women within Africa are the most vulnerable compared to men. And we know also that investment in gender equality are vastly insufficient. Women have been craving, have been advocating for more funds, for more hate to come. So that is the general issue concerning gender inequality. And then coming to deal with it from the climate change aspect. In 2018, there was a report by Oxfam that talks about making women farmers count. It found that in Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, and Pakistan, and Tanzania, governments and donors are failing to support women farmers to access vital farming inputs and adapt to climate change. You will ask me why. In the climate change realm, developed countries are supposed to assist developing countries to adapt and mitigate climate change. Just as I said under Article 9, it is their responsibility because they are the ones that have caused climate change. And the developing world is not the one that caused climate change, and it has been part of the UNFCCC system. So if the developed country has that obligation to do that, then how must they do it? They need to bring funding from public sector to address climate change impacts, especially adaptation in the developing world. And women also, who are disproportionately affected in the developing world, are also part of those who will need those funds to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Again, we need to look at it. Why women need to raise their voices is very important. If we look at some of the available evidence, the African continent's finance needs for adaptation activities are estimated to be USD 50 billion to USD 100 billion. And if you remember also that it's been touted that USD 100 billion should be contributed by developed world yearly to address climate change impacts all over the world. And you can imagine if that same USD 100 billion per year is what Africa itself needs by the year 2050, you can imagine what that means. It means that even the whole world, the climate finance available to address climate change, it's not enough, as it were, to address the magnitude of what is on the table. In sub-Saharan Africa, one of the regions most vulnerable to climate change, actual adaptation finance flows up approved to countries in the region from funds monitored by the Climate Funds Update are far lower at only USD 2.1 billion. So this is what we've been able to make in. It means the funds are not enough. And if they are not enough, even are they getting into the hands of women? That is why women in Africa need to raise voice. The funds coming, the flows coming into Africa, it's not enough. And then the women who are on the front lines also are not getting these funds. So Gender differences in time use access to assets, also credit and treatment by markets. And this is very important because in the general financial world, this is what women face, including legal and regulatory frameworks, all play a role in constraining women's opportunities. We all have that. Even in financial inclusion, women are still struggling. So when you are talking about the financial world, even without adding climate change, we are already on equal, we are on equal pedestal with men. So how do we solve this issue of finance? How can finance get into the hands of women? Over the years, the UNFCCC have come up with some climate finance mechanism to deliver finance to the developing world. We have the Adaptation Fund, we have the Strategic Climate Fund, we have the Climate Investment Funds, and some of these funds are under the UNFCCC, just like the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund, while the Climate Investment Fund is under the World Bank, which is a different stream from the UNFCCC. So over the years, there have been different funds, even at the local level in our countries. I'm sure there could be some funds which you can draw from to address climate finance. But today we want to actually focus on the Green Climate Fund because, just like I said earlier, is that fund that started from the outset that actually took gender seriously. In its funding documents, it actually references gender. It says that the fund will strive to maximize the impact of its funding for adaptation and mitigation and seek a balance between the two while promoting environmental, social, economic, and development benefits and taking a gender-sensitive approach. And that is what is there. And over the years, they continue to improve on their gender-responsive structure. For instance, the GCF has had 2 gender policies since 2015. They had a gender policy when they started, and in 2020, they adopted a reviewed gender policy just to take account of advances over the years. And they always have this time-bound gender policy and action plan. And it was the Green Climate Fund that first gave the mandate that every funding proposal coming to the GCF board must have an action plan. And what does an action plan mean when you are bringing a proposal to the Green Climate Fund board? What it means is that that proposal must tell the whole world how it wants to mainstream gender. Apart from telling us how you want to mainstream gender, you must have targets. Measurable targets. And once you have a measurable target towards men and women who are going to be involved in that project, you must also have a budget to support that action plan. So in that way, it means that no matter what project that is coming to the board, you can be sure that there will be some funding set aside to address gender issues and women's issues within those proposals. And then those targets and indicators will be monitored accordingly once the project proposals have been approved and when the projects are being implemented. So there is always room for review over and over throughout the lifespan of the project. So that is why GCF is so valuable to us as a women's group in Africa, because it promises to be a transformative process for us to actually address lack of finance for women in climate change. So how does the GCF connect with local women's movement in Africa? It's very important because if we have all the policies there, then how does that policy translate to finance in the hands of women on the ground? We need to connect with local women on the ground. And one of the ways is through our African GCF Gender Monitor, in which I am the one for the Anglophone. We also have another person in the name of Zainabu, who is the second Gender Monitor for Africa. So the Gender Monitor for Africa, it's a civil society initiative. It was inspired by our project called Participation is Power. Women Demand Gender Just Climate Finance. It's a very bold project. And it was under the project we started having what we call the gender monitors for the GCF. And one good thing about the gender monitor for the GCF is that it's not only looking at the Green Climate Fund, it's also looking at all other funds where women can realize critical climate finance to address the impacts of climate change on the ground. So for us as a GCF Gender Monitor in Africa, what do we do? First of all, we have a listserv, and currently we have over 150 women on that listserv from gender-focused group and members across Africa. On that listserv, we share important information from the GCF and from any other climate finance institution or mechanism that is going to be very useful for women in Africa. We also train and teach people to understand what the climate finance is all about. You will agree with me that a lot of people lack that awareness and the kind of big, what they call it, terminologies that is involved in climate finance. It scares a lot of women away. And we also know that as women, a lot of our local women, they lack the profile, they lack what it takes to be taking account of some of these things. But it's very important that they get engaged because this funds is for them. Because they are the ones at the local level and they are the ones at the front line. So whatever funds that is coming in must actually address what they are facing on the ground. So the gender monitors, most of the time, we share information. We also hold webinars, just as ICASA is holding one today, that we are trying to share information about the GCF and about climate finance. This is one of the things we do in our webinars. We train people to understand climate finance, to actually study the GCF, to see how the GCF gender policy will work for them on the ground. We mobilize women at country levels, and we have what we call country monitors. We have about 12 of them spread across Africa now. And the country monitors, what they do is that they also mobilize the women on the ground to engage with the national designated authorities in their country. The national designated authority is that arm of government that relates with the GCF or any climate finance institution on behalf of the country, because most of these funds come through those NDAs. So if you don't engage with the NDAs, you will not know what is happening, and you will not know how to engage with the process in such a way that it will be beneficial to you as a woman or to women as a group. Because when the fund comes, it comes through the government. And so as women on the ground, we need to engage our NDAs, talk to them, understand what they are doing. And so when they are putting proposals together, we need to mainstream women's concerns and issues into those proposals, and then let them ensure that there is allocation of resources to address women's issues once the project proposal is approved. So we as local women, we need to get engaged, not only get engaged to benefit, but also get engaged to track and monitor what is happening and hold government to account based on the climate finance flows that is coming into the country. So for African Gender Monitors, we participate also in GCF board meetings. For instance, I have participated in GCF board meetings from 2018, 2019. I've been also participating until COVID came and we couldn't travel, but we also were participating online and to monitor what is happening. We gather some of the, most of the proposals that has been approved for Africa. But one important thing we do is that once there is a proposal emanating from Africa on the GCF board for approval, we scrutinize them. We look at it to be sure that these proposals are actually addressing our needs. And how do we do that? First of all, we look at it. We look at if this proposal is talking about maybe 4 countries in Africa, maybe it could be Ghana, Tanzania, because we have country monitors. We call on our country monitors and send those proposals to them. Can you actually look at it? This proposal is for your country. and they have brought it to the GCF. Is it actually relating to your needs? What are the issues we have with it? So we get feedbacks on the ground. And then that feedbacks we escalate to the GCF observer group. And once we escalate that to the GCF observer group, we put it in form of what I call intervention at the level of the board. Because at the board, we have observer, our focal observers. We will have one for Global North and one for Global South. And for those of them, they will be in the boardroom to actually present our intervention based on feedbacks received from ground from countries. So that's the way we work. And these feedbacks are very, very important for us. But over the year, we've also noticed that some of these proposals are so very challenging for people to understand because they are very bulky. It takes time. So for us as gender monitors at the African level, we make it simple. We summarize it. We also have a webinar to discuss it and then put together our intervention, and then we can send it to the global GCF, CSO observer, and then we work together. Because normally if we have to travel to the GCF headquarters, which is in Songdo, we will join the global GCF observer group and we all work together collectively to bring the voice of the local people into the boardroom of the GCF. Many times, our intervention has succeeded. And if you want to see some of our interventions, you can just check it on the GCF Watch. That is where we put and curate all the interventions we've been having from the time the GCF CSO observer have been engaging with the GCF at the global level. So GCF African Gender Monitor was shared as we have had some impact over the years, in the last 2 years. And then we've had over 30 proposals. We've reviewed over 30 proposals and gender action plans from Africa to GCF, as well as 5 GCF policy documents. There are also policy documents like the gender policy. We were part of the movement to review the gender policy until it was adopted in 2020. Also, we are part of the movement to address the issue of readiness project, because before you can get some funding, you can also you have to prepare yourself. Your country has to prepare itself to get the funding. So there's what we call the readiness process. So everything about the Green Climate Fund must have gender in it. Gender must be considered from beginning to the end. So for us as African women on the table, it gives us an opportunity to engage and to continue to scrutinize and look at what is being done there to ensure that women's issues are given the needed consideration. So what do we do on that list? And I think it's very important for me to read some of our goals. It says we participate in GCF policy discussion, develop key policy recommendations and demands and influence, improve the GCF policy framework. We review and analyze proposed GCF projects. We monitor and analyze implemented GCF projects. Yes, if projects are implementation, we can hold accountability forums. We can ask questions. I think in the last GCF board, right before the GCF board, we had a meeting with AFDB when they brought a big project on energy for about, I think about 6 African countries thereabout. And we really thoroughly interrogated them. And they were committed to ensuring that local women, especially poor women, have access to energy. And then we share knowledge and create knowledge products regarding public funds, regional climate finance trends and activity, and women's organization engagement in climate finance. This is basically what we do. So, and as the Gender Monitor for Africa, the African Gender Monitors Project, I inspired another project which we call Strengthening the African Women's Participation and Voice in Climate Finance and the Green Climate Fund process, which we are implementing at the African level. This project will build capacity and empower African women and GCF gender monitors in Africa for active participation. It will facilitate and coordinate GCF gender country monitors across Africa and other stakeholders to represent African women voices in reviewing projects. This is what we've been doing. So it's just strengthening our voices to do more. giving us capacity to do more. Over in the next 2-3 months, we are going to be doing a lot of webinars on how to review project proposals at the GCF board. We are going to be doing accountability forums with organizations that have collected funds on behalf of Africa, implementing it already. We want to know how far they've gone, and we want to see how far they've been able to add women to their work. And then as a result of that project, we have what they call the African Voices newsletter, which is African Women's Voice on Climate Finance and the GCF. And you can always say, click on the link here to get there. We've just issued about 2 of the newsletter, and it will be a continuous as we move on. If you look at that newsletter, you will get a lot of information about the Green Climate Fund and what you need to know and how to engage with the Green Climate Funds. So what are the tips for climate advocacy, especially climate finance advocacy? I've especially brought this because it is very important. These are some of the advocacy booklets we have prepared with WeDo. And I think I put a link, I'm not sure, it should be on one of the slides there. We need to start local. Engage with the GCF, for example, can start with the project in your area or region or your country. So ask questions through your NDA. Rely on the available networks. Just like I'm using this network, we can use our different networks across Africa to share information, to build solidarity, and to work together and raise our voice. Because if we had all our voices together, it means that the possibility that we'll be heard is there. Then always remember the big picture. What is the big picture? Climate finance is supposed to support climate solution. If something doesn't seem like it, then we raise issues. It must be solution oriented, and not only solution, it must be genuine solution, not false solution. And then don't be afraid to dive in. A lot of women say we don't understand it, but you don't need to be afraid, just be engaged. As you continue to engage, as you continue to ask questions, you continue to learn and you continue to know more. And then think about all the processes. What is the process from the GCF down to your local levels, and from your local level down to the GCF? What does this process mean for you in assessing climate finance? They are very important things for us to consider. In Nigeria, we also have another project called the Local Women Engaging Climate Finance. And these are all projects just to continue to engage the process and ensure that our voices matter when finance is coming. We have it, and we've done a lot in Nigeria. We have what we call the community of practice. We have women on that platform. Every day we share information. We've been able to train them to understand what the GCF is. I think about 2 weeks ago, I was in the Niger Delta with Keben Foundation, also to train the local women. And right now, we are calling for locally led solutions to climate change, because we understand that when you are talking about finance, you must have a project to attract it, and your project must be bankable. The issue of bankable has been a big issue for a lot of women because people don't understand what bankability means. So we are trying to train women to let them understand what bankability means, how they can put their proposal in good perspective to attract climate finance from their NDAs. So we are now linking those women who have climate solutions. We help them put it together, and then we use it to engage our NDAs, so that when climate finance is coming into the country, they will not say the women don't have projects. Already we are putting it on their table. This is our project, fund them. This is how much we need to fund. So we too, as women, we are developing our own pipelines, local women, our local women pipelines, because in country, they will tell you they have bankable pipelines and they are having a lot of them, and some people don't know how to do bankable proposals. So we women too have to get ready to attract funds. So these are some of the things we are doing on ground with local women. We put our climate projects as a pipeline, and we share it with investors. We share it with those who can fund it. And more importantly, we are also ensuring that financial mechanisms that are being used, especially at the local level, take account of the needs of women. Because we find out that all these financing instruments, if they are not developed in a gender sensitive way, it will work for women. And then if it doesn't work for women, it means that women will not get the funds to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So the voices of women matter when we are developing climate financing instruments. And we've been able to ensure, at least for Nigeria for now, that women's voices matter. Because of our engagement with our NDAs, anytime any person wants to do GCF projects, they'll first of all call us and ask us. They will send some of this information to us. We will review it together and see whether it works for us. If it doesn't work for us, we tell them this is what is going to happen. This is the way we want to see it. So that at the outset, we are all part of the movement. From local to the time they develop the concept note, to the time they develop the proposal, and to the time it gets to the GCF board. So it now means that by the time it gets to the GCF board, we're also at the GCF board to also look at it. So it becomes a very important process for us to engage. So,
Mr. Kosa?
Thank you so much.
Sorry for interrupting your conversation, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. But kindly giving you 3 minutes to wrap up. Thank you.
So, as African gender monitors, we are still looking for country monitors in Africa. If you think you fit the bill and you are ready to advocate with us, we are ready to work with you. Even if you are not a country monitor, you can join our network. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I'm done. All right, thank you. It was really
ready for questions.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful presentation. And it is an eye-opener to learn about how green finance works. And I would like to request you, Ms. Akosa, will you rather take all the questions at once, or you want to take them in bits?
Maybe let's take the first round, maybe about 3, and then maybe we take it in 3s, depending.
That is okay. You're ready for the questions?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, I will take the first 3. The first one is from Rael Honu. And the question is, millions of women and girls produce tons of sanitary pads made from non-biodegradable materials, which end up as waste. What is our role in finding appropriate disposable methods for this waste? Number 2, the question is from Anne Obare. What is the position of gender equity or equality and financing in relation to COP26 upcoming negotiations? Number 3, from our very own Mary Nyasimi. How does an organization or person join the GCF Gender Monitors Network platforms in Africa? Those are the first 3.
Okay, I think I'll start from the last. How do you join the gender organization? Please, you can contact us. I think on my last slide, I put the name of the 2 gender monitors for Africa. We have myself, we have my email there, and my phone number. You can contact me on WhatsApp and on email, and then we take it up from there. We put you on the listserv, and we start sharing information with you, and we start working with you. Then I have the Francophone gender monitor, which is Ms. Zainab Zegda. Her email is also in the PowerPoint, and her phone number also. You can also get in touch with her. Then she will put you in the group of the Francophone if what you speak is French. So it's very important that you connect with these people, 2 of us, so that we can further guide you on what we do and join the trainings, join the GCF discussions, either at the international level or at the regional African level, or even in country, because we have some countries that have gender monitors, you can also connect with the gender monitors. Once you get in touch with us, we can always connect you with your country's gender monitor. And I think some of our gender monitor are here, are part of this discussion today. I think I can see Maria from Tanzania. Yeah, it's on the call. Maria, can you just raise up your hand or maybe say something? Hello? Hello, Maria? Maybe.
Akosa, could you please unmute?
As Maria comes on board, we would like to remind our guests, speaker has a request. She would like to have today's participants list, which includes your name and email address. If you will not like your contacts to be shared, kindly indicate in the chat box. Thank you.
Yeah, just as I was saying, we first of all, we also look at what has been achieved by the new gender strategy and discuss about it. We also discuss on negotiations around adaptation and mitigation, and we also discuss follow climate finance. So in all the streams of negotiation, we see how we mainstream gender into them. So for us, having a position right now, it's going to be for all of us women together under the women gender constituency. Normally every year when we are going towards the COP, we all sit together and analyze the position. What is the negotiations? How far have we gone to the negotiations? So then we now come up with appropriate gender demands for the COP. So in the next, I think in the next 1 week or so, we are going to be having our calls and we're going to be collating information from the ground and from the last negotiations, and then we put together our gender demand for COP26. But one important thing that we always put in our demand is always 100% that climate finance must be gender responsive. You can be sure that will be part of it, and we also insist that parties must listen to communities when they are looking for solutions to climate change. And those are very important things that normally run through most of our demands. And then for the sanitary pads, of course, all over the world, people are finding useful ways to turn waste into wealth. And I know in some countries, a lot of people have put some of this waste together and transform it into another thing. And so for this issue of sanitary pads, it's also very important to see what the waste can be transformed into. And then because you said they are biodegradable, just like plastics, it takes a long time for them to break down. So a lot of people are now using plastic and recycling plastic for so many other things. And I think just as sanitary pads too, we can always find a way to recycle it, because the issue of recycle and reuse is now gaining momentum all over the world. And the issue of sanitary pad will not be out of it also for us to recycle and see what other usefulness sanitary pad can be put to. But one thing we must also be very careful is the health impact of it. Does it have any side effects? Because it is used to take the menstruation blood. And using such a thing and recycling it, does it have any health impact? In good condition. It's very, very important. And that's the essence of we as women advocates. That's why we always think about genuine solutions, not false solutions. So it's very important.
Miss Akosa, are you still there?
We have lost her. Just give her a few minutes. Guests can be asking questions. Then she can come and answer later.
All right, thank you.
I'm back. Sorry for that break in transmission. So
welcome back.
Question, yeah.
Yes, let us take the second round of the questions. And the first one is from Glory Alexander Thomas. And the question is, how do we raise funds for small advocacy groups to tackle climate change problems?
Yep. Do we have more questions?
Yes, we do. The second one is from Anne Obaye. What is the position of gender equity and financing in relation to the upcoming COP26 negotiations?
I think I've answered that.
Yes, it's a repeat question, and I hope that she got the answer.
Yeah.
Then the other question is from Juan Towobola, and he's asking, or she is asking, can COP26 make funding flexible for women organizations in Nigeria, like in Uganda and Tanzania?
No, what question? The question again, please.
The question is, can COP26 negotiations, I believe, make funding flexible for women organizations in Nigeria, like in Uganda and Tanzania?
Okay.
And the other question is from Nelly.
Yeah.
And her question is, apart from the Ministry of Environment or Climate Change unit in the ministry, which unit or department can women access the climate fund?
Okay. I think
the other question I will ask is, what is the role of the African Continental Free Trade Area in regard to financing climate change, especially when it comes to dealing with women and persons with disabilities? And the second question I would ask is, what is the role of Africa's Agenda 2063 in regard to climate change finance? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. One thing I first of all admit is that the role of Africa is not something I'm versed in, so I can't answer that question. I need to be honest with you. And its relation to climate finance. Maybe it's something I have to explore. But for Agenda 2063, if you recall that I think 2 years ago, the AU entered into a gender AU strategy on the Agenda 2063, the gender strategy for Agenda 2063, and they came up with some 10 important areas to address in the next 10 years. And climate change and environment is one of the important pillars for it to address within the Agenda 2063. Please, you can go online and go and look at the gender strategy for the Agenda 2063. So I think it has been adopted about 2 years ago, 2018, in Addis Ababa, and then it's been implemented currently. So that is it for the Agenda 2063. Climate change is a very strong pillar within that gender strategy for the Agenda 2063. Then can COP26 negotiation make funding available? Well, part of the essence of going for COP26 is to ensure that we deliver climate finance to the most vulnerable and to developing countries. So the issue of finance is also going to be negotiated there. And UNFCCC as an organization does not really make funding available to women's organizations like that. That's why we have the funding mechanisms like the Adaptation Fund, we have the GCF, we have the Strategic Climate Fund, we have the Climate Investment Funds. Those ones are there to channel financial flows to countries. And from those flows, when it gets to your country, women's project also are part of it, because all these funds now have a gender policy within their structure and in delivering projects on ground. But one more thing you need to know in terms of financing local women is that at country level, there are some important climate funds at the country level. For instance, in Nigeria, I know a lot of women think the issue of climate bonds is a big issue, but climate bonds are there. And then there are some banks, local banks that have some funding, especially for women. I will tell you that the GCF has given the GCF funds assessed by some international accredited entity has been channeled through our local banks. In fact, some of them are microfinance banks to give concessionary loans to women farmers or women who are involved in climate solutions. And then it's an investment case. All you need to do is to put your investment in a very important perspective that your money can be given to you. So these are important financing at the local level. But one good thing about some of these financing is that there's what we call technical assistance. And those technical assistance is to help women to put their investment case on the table. So a lot of funding is directed towards this technical assistance by these banks to help women to prepare their investment case, to prepare their plans and action plans and everything that they need to attract funding. So this is the way that you can always get funding at the local level. Apart from the climate funds, there are other local funds that you can tap into from the banks, from financial institutions, from microfinance, and all of them are there. All you need is just get in touch with, if you have a community of practice of climate finance in your country, join them, whatever you have. And I know there is a civil society initiative in some countries. They call it CSO readiness also. So those kinds of platforms also are very, very important. If you have them in your country, you can join up so that you can get some important information that will enable you access funding as a woman's group or as a businesswoman who has a climate solution for investment. Then how do we raise funds for, I can't remember the first one now. How do we raise funds for climate? Can you please help me with that?
So which question?
Question. Because I started from the last to the...
Okay, it must have been the one from the Ministry of Environment or Climate Change Unit.
Okay.
Which ministry or unit can women access the climate fund?
One thing you must know is that basically it's the DCC that assesses climate funds in every country. They call it the Department of Climate Change. It depends on what you call it. In some countries, it may be Ministry of Environment. In some countries, it may be the Ministry of Water Resources. Some countries may be their central bank. There are two institutions that are very important at the national level. It is the institution that addresses climate change in your country. Basically, they are called the National Designated Authority, while the second one is the National Implementing Entity. The National Designated Authority is the one that mobilizes, talks about, prepare proposals, and send to the climate funds. But the persons that receives it, the institution that receives it, the National Implementing Entity, because the NDA cannot receive funds. It can prepare for it, it can call consultations around it and do so many things, but it cannot receive funds. It must look for another implementing entity within the country. And that is the theory of what we call direct access. Direct access means as a country, you can access climate funds directly rather than going through intermediaries like the UNDP, the World Bank, or things like that. So it means that the intermediation cost is removed, and then you have more funding in your hands to do so many things. So for the DCC, for now, they are the ones that they can help you engage with them, and they can the one that can recommend you to the national implementing entity when the money comes into their hands. But just as I've explained, you can explore other options in country. The banks have it. Some with the banks, some of them are grants. while some of them are loans are concessionary rates. So you can just wait through the banking system in your country and ask for a lot of country. And I know in some countries, they even have some funding that people can tap into to address climate change. For instance, in Nigeria, I think in Cross River, one of the states, they have what they call Green Climate Fund in their state, and they give it to organizations to address climate change in their state. So there are different financing instruments that is available at the local level. It is just for us to get in touch, join the network, and let's share information so that you understand where you can get the funding from. But basically, it's always the ministry that addresses climate change in your country that probably will be the national designated authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights. And I would like to ask one last question before we open the floor to the participants. I had seen, Biliga, you had your hand up after Madam responds to the last question. I will request that you be ready to share with us your insights. And the last question is from Glory. And she asks, most women initiatives cannot meet the complex and rigorous requirements and eligibility conditions set by funding and donor agencies in accessing climate funds. How can these barriers be made gender flexible and responsive? Thank you.
Okay, great. That's a very important question because a lot of people have been asking that question. And we have seen some different examples that exist from other funds. For instance, from the Green Global Environment Facility, we see there is what we call the small grant funds, the SGP. A lot of you have it in your country. They have it in Ghana, they have it in Nigeria, they have it in Kenya. And it provides a flexible way for women to access funds, especially for women who don't have much profile, who most of the time they cannot do all this accounting and everything. Yes, these are funding streams that can help you to get some funding with less formality. And then apart from that, we have also seen that there are some big organizations that can absorb the fund on behalf of women's group and can share it in bits and pieces to local women's group and be the one that will be accountable for the funding. And one example comes to mind is what our Women 2030 project. The Women 2030 project actually did that all over Africa and in some Asian countries. For instance, in Nigeria, Women Environment Program got the funding on behalf of women in Nigeria, and they distributed it to different local women on SDGs. So we use the money to train local women on SDGs to see how they can continue to advocate for the implementation of the SDGs in their states and in their country. So that's an example where it stood for all of us to collect the fund, and we got the funding from them. So they stood there to help us do all the accounting and everything. And for the Green Climate Fund, we are looking up to African Women Development Fund also to get these funds and distribute to African women, because over the years, African Women Fund has been there for us, giving women, local women funding to do their projects. So we are still working with African Women Development Fund to see how African Women Development Fund can get a big chunk of the Green Climate Fund and then distribute to women in Africa. And we are also working with all other women's groups, whether in Asia, whether in Africa, or whether even in Europe. We're all coming together to see what all of us can do together, who can be that undertaker on behalf of local women who have no profile, who have no accounting system, but yet they are very relevant on the ground when it comes to addressing climate change impact. In fact, they have that knowledge and they are agents of change in their communities. They stand tall for their communities when it comes to climate change action. Then does it mean that we would deny them because they are unlettered or because they don't have all the big profile that is needed to assess funds? That shouldn't be so. So that's why it's always important to prepare a bigger organization that will absorb the fund on behalf of local women and can distribute it to women in such a way that it will be a win-win situation for women. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your insight. I leave this platform enlightened today and hoping that this information can trickle down to our different organizations. By virtue that we've ran out of time, I would like to encourage us to continue tweeting and retweeting what we have learned, and also take this opportunity to thank everyone for participating in today's conversation. Your time and participation is appreciated, and we encourage you to keep sharing, because when we share, we get to grow and we get to learn from each other. Our next conversation will be held on the 31st of August, 2021, and the topic will be shaping the gender in COP 2026. The subtopics are: can more women in the upcoming negotiation roles increase the chances of success and ensure a fairer decision-making process? How can we amplify the voices of women on the Korovia Joint Work Program, that is KJWA, and strengthening the role of youth at COP26? Finally, we would like to encourage you to send your name and any questions that you will have that has not been addressed today, or any question that you have regarding the upcoming topic, to an email address that will be projected and shared on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to answer any of the questions again?
You can take 2 minutes to wrap up the conversation, and we are glad that you found time to join us today.
Okay. So for me, amplifying women's voice in the Coronavirus Work Program, all I would say for now is that let us keep following the negotiations on Coronavirus Work Plan and get in touch with women gender constituency, because most of the time we will follow, and then the appropriate stand for women can be shared as we follow those negotiations. So it's not something that you can sit down and say, okay, this is the way it will go, but it also depends on the trends of the negotiation, and that will determine how we address those issues. And for young people, of course, there's been enough advocacy around young people getting involved in climate change negotiations. And I think the most important thing for young people also to get engaged. Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to our people, to share this information. And I believe that as a result of today's information sharing and knowledge sharing, we are going to get more people into the Gender Monitors Network in Africa. Thank you very much
for finding time to join us and enlightening us. Thank you, our participants, and we look forward to continued engagement and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The program was enriching as usual. Titi, you were great as usual. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate all of you.
Okay, we thank God.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.